Only the Paranoid Survive was written by Andy Grove, the third employee of Intel, who would one day serve as Intel's CEO, and a man who transformed Intel into the company we now know. Strategic inflection points, what this whole book is about, is a term you should know. Strategic inflection points are times when the fundamentals of a business are about to change. The year was 1994, and at this time, Intel didn't really sell processors to people as they do now. They sold microprocessors to computer makers. Usually when any problems would come up, Intel would handle it with the computer manufacturers, engineer to engineer. There was a bug with the floating point unit in Intel's new processor. Intel didn't think of it as a big deal because for the average spreadsheet user, a problem would come up once every 27,000 years. This leaked to the public though, and over time it caused a huge problem for Intel. They found themselves dealing with people who had bought nothing directly from them, yet were very angry with them. It was blown so much out of proportion that IBM stopped shipments of all Pentium-based processors. Always understand all users of your product. Intel ended up replacing each and every chip with the floating point unit error. It cost them $475 million. How did this actually happen, though? Intel surpassed the large US producers. They surpassed the major Japanese players, and they were still growing fast, faster than most large companies. They had also become bigger than most of their customers, companies that Andy remembered from their earlier years at Intel to be monumentally large corporations. What is learned is to always be aware of how you seem in the public eye. In the right lighting, even a mouse can look like a bear, and vice versa. But that's not the real reason why this happened. All businesses operate by some set of unstated rules, and sometimes these rules change, often in very significant ways. There are no flashing signs of these changes. They creep up on you just as they crept up on Intel, without warning. You know only that something has changed, something big, something significant, even if it's not entirely clear what that something is. And it's exactly at times like this that hard and definitive actions are required. But not everyone understands these huge rule shifts at the time. Managers, especially those who deal with the outside world, like people in sales, are often the first to realize that what worked before doesn't work anymore. And the funny thing is, it's the leader who is often the last of all to know. I think it's the most important lesson from this whole book. The leaders are often the last to know of change. In 1215 AD, during the Mongol campaign against the Jin dynasty, the Jin emperor at the time and the Jin court were so disconnected from the realities of the Mongol threat and so busy with their pleasures and daily routines that they didn't fully grasp the gravity of the situation until the Mongols were already at the palace gates, and by then it was too late. Most CEOs are in the center of their own fortified palace, and news from the outside has to percolate through layers of people from the periphery where the action is. We need to expose ourselves to the lower level employees who, when encouraged, will tell us a lot that we need to know. Usually there are 6 forces affecting a business. Professor Michael Porter of Harvard University identified them as: number 1, the power, vigor, and competence of a company's existing competitors. Are there a lot of them? Are they well funded? Do they clearly focus on your business? Number 2, the power, vigor, and competence of a company's suppliers. Are there a lot of them so that the business has plenty of choices, or are there a few of them so that they have the business by the throat? Are they aggressive and greedy, or are they conservative and guided by the long view toward their customer? Number 3, the power, vigor, and competence of a company's customers. Are there a lot of them, or is the business dependent on just 1 or 2 major customers? Are the customers very demanding, perhaps because their business operates under cutthroat competition, or is their business more gentlemanly? Number 4, the power, vigor, and competence of a company's potential competitors. These players are not in the business today, but circumstances could change, and they might decide to come in. If so, they might be bigger, more competent, better funded, and more aggressive than the existing competitors. Number 5, the possibility that your product or service can be built or delivered in a different way. This is often called substitution and can be the most deadly of all. New techniques, new approaches, new technologies can upset the old order. mandate a new set of rules, and create an entirely new climate in which to do business. This is what trucking and air transportation have done to railroads, what container shipping has done to traditional ports, and what superstores have done to small shops. And finally, the most recent modification of competitive theory, number 6, the force of complementers. Each company's product works better or sometimes only works with another company's product. Cars need gasoline. Gasoline needs cars. Computers need software, and software needs computers. Usually, a strategic inflection point reflects a 10x change in one of the factors or multiple factors of business. So, how do you actually know if you're in a strategic inflection point? This isn't a very easy question to answer. First, there's a troubling sense that something is different. Things don't work the way they used to. Then, there's a growing dissonance between what your company thinks it's doing and what's actually happening inside the bowels of the organization. Inflection points aren't like getting lost on a hike. Working your way through a strategic inflection point is like venturing into what Andy calls the valley of death, a perilous transition between the old and new way of doing business. You march in because there is no other choice. But then we have another question. How do you know the right moment to take action, to make the changes that will save your company or your career? Unfortunately, you don't. But you can't wait until you do. Timing is everything. If you undertake changes while your company is still healthy, while your ongoing business forms a protective bubble in which you can experiment with new ways of doing business, you can save much more of your company, strength, your employees, and your strategic position. But that means acting when not everything is known, when the data isn't in yet. Even those who believe in the scientific approach to management will have to rely on instinct and personal judgment. When you're caught in the turbulence of a strategic inflection point, the sad fact is instinct and judgment are all you've got to guide you through. The strategic inflection point is the time to wake up and listen. Michael Dell started supplying his friends with computers he assembled out of parts in his dorm room at the University of Texas. Basically, he tapped into the desire of customers of the horizontal PC industry for low-cost standard computer systems. Later, Dell built on his experience and started a company based on the premise that people other than his college friends would also be interested in purchasing computers customized to their specific needs and supplied through direct means. Novell was a small company fashioned along the lines of the old computer industry. They built hardware and developed network software to run on their own hardware. The head of Novell, Ray Noorda, often tells the story that it wasn't very hard to figure out what to do. They didn't have enough money to continue paying their suppliers. That's when they abandoned their hardware business and concentrated on software. By the end of the 2000s, Novell became a $1 billion software company. When strategic inflection points sweep through an industry, the more successful a participant was in the old industry structure, the more threatened it is by change and the more reluctant it is to adapt to it. The cost to enter a given industry in the face of a well-entrenched participant can be very high. When the structure breaks, the cost to enter may become trivially small, giving rise to Dells and Novells. As the PC industry was transforming from vertical to horizontal, Andy found 3 rules to live by. 1. Don't differentiate without a difference. And what that means is, don't introduce improvement whose only purpose is to give you an advantage over your competitor without giving your customers a substantial advantage. 2. In this hyper-competitive horizontal world, opportunity knocks when a technology break or fundamental change comes your way. Grab it. Time advantage in this business is the surest way to gain market share. 3. Price for what the market will bear. Price for volume. Then work like the devil on your costs so that you can make money at that price. The incident that I'm about to describe is how Andy learned with every fiber of his being what a strategic inflection point is about and what it takes to claw your way through one, inch by excruciating inch. It takes objectivity, the willingness to act on your convictions, and the passion to mobilize into supporting those convictions. Intel started in 1968. At the time, their core idea was simple: Since the cost to produce a silicon chip with a larger amount of transistors was roughly the same as producing a chip with a smaller amount of transistors, if they put more transistors on a chip, the cost per transistor would be lower and the performance would be higher. When they thought of what they could do with this growing number of transistors, the answer seemed obvious: build chips that would perform the function of memory in computers. They started modestly, with their first product being a 64-bit memory. The chip could store just 64 digits. The team continued, and soon enough they had a 1024-bit chip in development. It was a big hit, but because of that, supplying the chip became an issue. It was held together with the silicon equivalent of baling wire and chewing gum. The name of this device was 1103, and to this day, when a digital watch shows that number, many survivors of that era take note. Intel was a key player in the memory business and held their positions against other competition for the next decade. Then, the early 80s rolled in, and Japanese memory producers entered the scene to fill product shortages. At first, the Japanese memory producers were very helpful, but by the mid-80s, something felt different for Intel and their employees. Those who went to Japan would report back with scary tales of whole floors of people working on 16K, 64K, 256K, and even a million kilobytes of memory. At the time, Intel was still a small company in Santa Clara. Back then, that much memory was considered preposterous. That wasn't the only issue, though. Japanese products were consistently made better, much better. On top of that, it was rumored that the Japanese companies had limitless access to capital from the Japanese government or parent companies. Intel's first reaction was denial, but they did fight back, and they fought hard. Intel improved its quality and brought down costs, but the Japanese fought back too. Intel even got hold of a memo sent to the sales force of a large Japanese company. It said, "Win with the 10% rule. Find Intel sockets, quote 10% below their price. If they requote, go 10% again. Don't quit until you win." That actually reminds me of something Ray Kroc, the man who made the McDonald's you know today, said. "If any of my competitors were drowning, I'd stick a hose in their mouth and turn on the water. It is ridiculous to call this an industry. This is not. This is rat eat rat, dog eat dog. I'll kill 'em, and I'm going to kill 'em before they kill me." By 1984, business had slowed down. To Intel, it seemed no one wanted to buy their chips anymore. Andy recalls a conversation he had with Gordon Moore in 1985, Intel's chairman and CEO. Andy turned to Gordon and asked, "If we got kicked out and the board brought in a new CEO, what do you think he would do?" Moore answered without hesitation, "He would get us out of memories." Andy responded, "Why shouldn't you and I walk out the door, come back, and do it ourselves?" That is what started Intel's difficult journey of getting out of memories. This wasn't a fast journey, though. Intel was started as a memory business. That is what everyone thought of Intel as, especially their employees. The issue was that upper management at the time wasn't giving direct answers to questions the employees had about direction. The senior manager overseeing the memory business couldn't get on board with the program and was replaced. Andy made it clear to the new manager by spelling out exactly what he had to do: get Intel out of memories. People who have no emotional stake in a decision can see what needs to be done sooner. If existing management wants to keep their jobs when the basics of a business are undergoing profound change, they must adopt an outsider's intellectual objectivity. The change itself for Intel wasn't as difficult as Andy thought it would be. He realized that just like Intel's customers, the employees had known what was inevitable long before senior management faced up to it. Even though this seems like a strategic inflection point, the word point is something of a misnomer. It's not a point. It's a long, torturous struggle. Intel took 3 long years to get out of memories, even after knowing they had to do it. Those years were wasteful. All the credit shouldn't be given to Intel's upper management, though. It was the men and women lower in the organization that, unknown to upper management, by doing their daily work, got Intel ready to execute the strategic turn that would save Intel. The exit from memory was done by middle management, who month by month allocated wafer production capacity from products where they seemed wasteful, memories, to other products which seemed to generate better margins, such as microprocessors. People in the trenches are usually in touch with impending changes early. Salespeople understand shifting customer demands before management does. Financial analysts are the earliest to know when the fundamentals of a business change. And at the end of the day, the head of the company can point the direction to move in, but it's the middle management who does the moving. So how do we know if the change those in the trenches feel are actually strategic inflection points? Most strategic inflection points, instead of coming in with a bang, approach on little cat feet. Ask yourself questions to attempt to distinguish signal from noise. Is your key competitor about to change? First, figure out who your key competitor is by asking a hypothetical question, named the silver bullet test. It works like this. If you had just one bullet in a figurative pistol, whom among your many competitors would you save it for? Asked point blank, this question provokes a visceral response, and people can normally give an answer without much hesitation. When the answer to this question stops being as crystal clear as it used to be, and some of your people direct the silver bullet to competitors who didn't merit this kind of attention previously, it's time to sit up and pay special attention. When the importance of your competitor shifts, it is often a sign that something significant is going on. You should also ask if your key competitor is about to change. Does the company that in the past years mattered the most to you and your business seem less important today? Does it look like another company is about to eclipse them? If so, it may be a sign of shifting industry dynamics. Do people seem to be losing it around you? Does it seem like people who for years have been very competent have suddenly decoupled from what really matters? You and your management have both been selected by the evolutionary forces of your original business to be at the top of your organization. But if key aspects of the business shift around you, the very process of genetic selection that got you and your associates where you are might retard your ability to recognize new trends. A sign of this might be that all of a sudden, some people don't seem to get it. Conversely, it may be that you yourself are often inclined to shake your head in confusion. Who else can detect inflection points? The priestess who foretold the fall of Troy was Cassandra. You also have Cassandras in your organization who can constantly be helpful in recognizing strategic inflection points. Cassandras can come from anywhere in your organization, but more often than not, as we said before, they are middle management, specifically in sales, as they are outdoors the most. They reside where the winds of the real world blow. You can't spend all your time listening to random inputs, though. Many times, these Cassandras come to you about things that never become strategic inflection points. These Cassandras can only come to you if there is open communication throughout the organization, which brings us to our next way of extrapolating whether inflection points are on their way. Debate. The more complex an issue in your organization gets, the more levels of management should be involved, because people from different levels of management bring completely different points of view and expertise to the table, as well as different genetic makeups. But this debate should also involve people outside the company, customers and partners who not only have different areas of expertise, but also have different interests. If you're in middle management, don't be a wimp. Don't sit on the sidelines waiting for the senior people to make a decision so that later you can criticize them over a beer. Your time for participating is now. You owe it to the company and you owe it to yourself. Don't justify holding back by saying that you don't know the answers. At times like this, nobody does. At times of strategic inflection points, you also have to be able to argue with what is considered fact. Data can only go so far because it is a measure based on the past. Most people won't speak their minds, though. Constructively debating tough issues and getting somewhere is only possible when speaking your mind isn't followed by punishment. David Ogilvy of Ogilvy and Mather said that fear is a demon that devours the soul of an agency. It diminishes the quality of our imaginations. It dulls our appetite for adventure. It sucks away our youth. There should be fear in an organization, but a different type. Andy says there should be a fear of competition, a fear of bankruptcy, fear of being wrong, and fear of losing. They all act as powerful motivators. It's fear that makes Andy scan his email at the end of a long day, searching for problems. News of disgruntled customers, potential slippages in the development of a new product, rumors of unhappiness on the part of key employees. It is fear that every evening makes him read the trade press reports on competitors' new developments and leads him to tear out particularly ominous articles to take to work for follow-up the next day. It is fear that gives him the time to listen to Cassandra's when all he wants to do is cry out, "Enough already, the sky isn't falling," and go home. Simply put, fear can be the opposite of complacency. Complacency often afflicts precisely those who have been the most successful. It is often found in companies that have honed the sort of skills that are perfect for their environment. But when their environment changes, these companies may be the slowest to respond properly. A good dose of fear of losing may help sharpen their survival instincts. One of the most detrimental things to the well-being of a company could be a middle manager's fear of punishment when he or she brings bad tidings. The fear that your management will not want to hear the bad news from the periphery. If you are a senior management, under no circumstances should you ever shoot the messenger. It takes many years of consistent conduct to eliminate fear of punishment. It only takes one incident to introduce it. News of this incident will spread through the organization like wildfire and shut everyone up. An environment of fear will take over and lead to paralysis and cut off the flow of bad news from the periphery. As a senior manager, your goal should be to break down the walls between those who possess knowledge power and those who possess organization power. An environment like this is easy to describe but hard to create and maintain. Dramatic or symbolic moves do nothing. It requires living this culture, promoting constant collaborative exchanges between the holders of knowledge power and the holders of organizational power to create the best solutions in the interest of both. But what are we supposed to watch out for when we're in one of these valleys of death? A manager in a business that's going through a strategic inflection point is likely to experience a variation of the well-known stages of a serious loss. The sequence modified for strategic inflection points go denial, escape or diversion, and finally acceptance and pertinent action. A sign of this diversion is when companies are facing major changes in their core business. They seem to plunge into what seems to be totally unrelated acquisitions and mergers. A lot of these activities are motivated by the need of senior management to occupy themselves, respectably, with something that requires their attention day in and day out. At times like these, senior managers often involve themselves in feverish charitable fundraising, a lot of outside board activities, or pet projects. During the years preceding the memory episode, Andy devoted a significant amount of time to write a book, even as the storm clouds were already very evident. He says, "As I write this, I wonder what storm clouds I might be ducking now. I'll probably know in a few years." Senior managers got to where they are by having been good at what they do, so it's not surprising that they will continue implementing the same strategic and tactical moves that worked for them during the course of their careers, especially during their championship season. This phenomenon is called the inertia of success. It is extremely dangerous and it can reinforce denial. We refuse to acknowledge changes around us, almost like a child who does not like what he's seeing, so he closes his eyes and counts to 100 and figures that what bothered him will go away. The phrase you're likely to hear at such times is, "Just give us a bit more time." Another one of the surest indications a company is struggling is the trap of saying one thing and doing another. When people in the company start asking questions like, "But how can we say X when we do Y?" More than anything else, this is a tip-off that a strategic inflection point may very well be in the making. The resolution of the strategic dissonance comes through experimentation. Once the level of control in your organization is loosened, people try different techniques, review different products, explore different sales channels, and go after different customers. Andy says the operating phrase should be, "Let chaos reign." The dilemma is that you can't suddenly start experimenting when you realize you're in trouble unless you've been experimenting all along. It's too late to do it once things have changed. You should have been experimenting with new products, technologies, channels, promotions, and new customers all along. Then when you sense that something has changed, you'll have a number of experiments that can be relied on to expand your bag of tricks. And your organization will be in a much better position to expand the scope of experimentation and to tolerate the increased levels of chaos. That is the precursor for repositioning the company in a new business direction. I feel like chaos is only necessary in the case of organizations that aren't lean and operate in a bureaucratic fashion. A lean operation most likely experiences less strategic inflection points and remains more experimental because you have to get through less mud to communicate with others outside of your department. And the people of the organization are more likely to share your same mindset. At the time of the memory fiasco, microprocessors were not Intel's main line. They actually spent more money developing and marketing the microprocessors than the chips generated in revenue. It actually reminds me of how Steve Jobs said, "Stay hungry, stay foolish, never let go of your appetite to go after new ideas, new experiences, and new adventures." There's no panic in the early stages of an inflection point. One can couch the arguments for inaction in the early stages in statements like, "We shouldn't tinker with the golden goose," or "How could we possibly take our best people away from the business that pays all of our salaries and put them on a speculative new project?" The most alarming one of all is, the organization can take just so much change, it's not ready for more, which really means I'm not ready to lead the organization into the changes that it needs to face. Looking back on his own career, Andy says, "I have never made a tough change, whether it involved resource shifts or personnel moves, that I haven't wished I had made a year or so earlier." This tendency is easy to see in others, although we're prone to blindness when we do it ourselves. It's important to know our place in an industry so that we know how to progress. Every company has organizational charts, sometimes piles of them, that show the interrelationship of organizational units. If those are needed to help employees figure out how to operate inside a company, wouldn't an equivalent diagram of an industry be extremely helpful? So develop one. How do you get through the valley of death? Taking an organization through a strategic inflection point is a march through unknown territory. The rules of business are unfamiliar or have not been formed. Consequently, you and your associates lack the mental map of the new environment, and even the shape of your desired goal is not completely clear. Things are tense. Often in the course of traversing a strategic inflection point, your people lose confidence in you and in each other. And what's worse, you lose confidence in yourself. Members of management are likely to blame one another for tough times the company is experiencing. Infighting and arguments as to what direction to take bubble up and proliferate. Form a mental image of what the company should look like when you get to the other side. Communicate it simply to your tired, demoralized, and confused staff. But to do this, you have to undertake defining what the company will not be. The dangers of oversimplification pale in comparison with the danger of catering to the desire of every manager to be included in the simple description of the refocused business, therefore making that description so lofty and so inclusive as to be meaningless. In a leadership position, how you spend your time has an enormous symbolic value. It will communicate what's important or what isn't far more powerfully than all the speeches you can give. Strategic change doesn't start at the top. It starts with your calendar. Strategic plans are a statement of what we intend to do. Strategic actions or steps we have taken or are taking suggest our long-term intent. Strategic plans sound like a political speech. Strategic actions are concrete steps. Steps which include shifting of resources from what was appropriate for the old idea of business to what is appropriate for the new. Resources that not only include raw materials or funding, but also resources such as your best people, their knowledge, skills, and expertise are an equally important resource. Strategic plans don't carry as much weight as strategic actions because strategic plans deal with events that are so far in the future that they will have little relevance to what you actually have to do today. The most effective way to transform a company is through a series of incremental changes that are consistent with a clearly articulated end result. This reminds me of something I read in Atomic Habits by James Clear. It is easy to get bogged down trying to find the optimal plan for change. The fastest way to lose weight, the best way to build muscle, the perfect idea for a side hustle. We are so focused on figuring out the best approach that we never get around to taking action. This is repetitive, but it can't be stressed enough. The right time to act when it comes to resource shifts is when the momentum of your existing strategy is still positive, your business is still growing, your customers and complementers still think highly of you, yet there's enough evidence of blips on your radar screen to warrant, at minimum, exploring their significance. Your tendency will almost always be to wait too long. Yet the consequences of being early are less onerous than the consequences of being late. Advance the pace of your actions and increase their magnitude. You'll find that you are more likely to be close to right. Companies may profitably wait for others to test the limits of technological possibilities or market acceptance, and then commit to following, catching up, and passing them. When you drive in the fog, it is a lot easier to drive fast if you're chasing the taillight of the car ahead of you. The dangers of a taillight strategy is that once you catch up and pass, you'll find yourself without a set of taillights to follow, and without the confidence and competence in setting your own course in a new direction. The biggest danger facing an early mover company is that it may have a hard time distinguishing a signal from a noise and start to respond to an inflection point that isn't one. Even if it is right and it responds, it is likely to be ahead of its market. But the early movers are the only companies that have the potential to affect the structure of the industry and define how the game is played by others. Mark Twain hit it on the head when he said, "Put all your eggs in one basket and watch that basket." If competition is chasing you, and they always are, this is why only the paranoid survive, you only get out of the valley of death by outrunning the people who are after you. And you can only outrun them if you commit yourself to a particular direction and go as fast as you can. And sure, you could argue that since they're chasing you, you should give yourself all sorts of alternative directions. In other words, hedge. No, hedging is expensive and dilutes commitment. Without exquisite focus, the resources and energy of the organization will be spread a mile wide and they will be an inch deep. While you're going through the valley of death, you may think you see the other side, but you can't be sure whether it's truly the other side or just a mirage. Yet you have to commit yourself to a certain course and a certain pace, otherwise you will run out of water and energy before long. If you're wrong, you will die. But most companies don't die because they're wrong. Most companies die because they don't commit themselves. They fritter away their momentum and their valuable resources while attempting to make a decision. The greatest danger is in standing still. When a company is meandering, its management staff is demoralized. When the management staff is demoralized, nothing works. Every employee feels paralyzed. This is exactly when you need to have a strong leader setting a direction. And it doesn't even have to be the best direction, just a strong, clear one. Organizations in the valley of death have a natural tendency to drift back into the morass of confusion. They are very sensitive to obscure or ambiguous signals from their management. Heads of companies often inadvertently contribute to this confusion. Some time ago, a business reporter told Andy of an encounter with the head of a major Japanese corporation. The reporter was working on a profile of the company. When he asked questions that tried to clarify the strategy of the corporation, the other man angrily retorted, "Why would I tell you our strategy? So I can help our competitors?" Andy thought this man wouldn't talk about his strategy not because he was afraid of helping his competitors, but because he didn't have one. These public statements always have struck him as extraordinarily ambiguous. The point is this: how can you hope to mobilize a large team of employees to pull together, accept new and different job assignments, work in an uncertain environment, and work hard, despite the uncertainty for their future, if the leader of the company can't or won't articulate the shape of the other side of the valley? Clarity of direction, which includes describing what we are going after, as well as describing what we will not be going after, is exceedingly important at the late stages of a strategic transformation. Much as in the middle of a strategic inflection point, you needed to let chaos reign in order to explore your alternatives, to lead your organization out of the resulting ambiguity, and to energize your staff toward a new direction, you must rein chaos in. The time for listening to Cassandras is over. The time for experimentation is also over. The time to issue marching orders, exquisitely clear marching orders, to the organization is here. And the time to commit the resources of the corporation as well as your own resources, your own time, visibility, speeches, statements in external forums, which are always given more credibility inside the company than what you say directly to your employees, is upon you. Most of all, you must be a role model of the new strategy. This is the best way to prove that you are committed to it. At times like this, your calendar becomes your most important strategic tool. Most executives' schedules are shaped by the inertia of prior actions. You are likely to accept appointments, attend meetings, and schedule activities that are similar to what you had been doing in the past. Break the mold now. Resist the tacit temptation to accept invitations or make appointments because you've done so in the past. Ask yourself the question, will going to this meeting teach me about the new technology or the new market that I think is very important now? Will it send a message about the importance of the new direction? If so, go to it. If not, resist it. When you have to reach a large number of people, you can't possibly over-communicate and over-clarify. Give a lot of speeches to your employees. Go to their workplaces, get them together, and explain over and over what you're trying to achieve. Take particular care to answer questions of the "does it mean that" variety. Those are the ones that offer the best chance of bringing your message home. Speak and answer questions as often as possible. While it may seem like you're repeating yourself, in reality you will be reinforcing a strategic message. By including middle management in your thinking and doing a particularly good job of enlisting them as sources of amplification of your new direction, you can multiply your presence many times. Take extra time with middle managers because otherwise you risk losing their wholehearted commitment. The best aspect of this type of exposure is that you will test whether you can pass the gauntlet of your employees' questions, which are usually shrewd, and in a free environment, they can question you in a way that no one else can. If there is strategic illogic in your thinking, they will sniff it out and poke at it. The medium through which you communicate is also very important. A lot of times, management attempts to communicate a new strategic direction by medium of closed-circuit television or pre-recorded video. This may seem logical and easy, but it won't work. The interactive element, the give and take, the opportunity to ask the "doesn't mean that" type of questions is lost in this one-way medium. If your employees don't have an opportunity to test your thinking in live sessions or electronically, your message will seem like so much hot air. Resist the temptation to do what's easy here. Communicating strategic change in an interactive, exposed fashion is not easy, but it is absolutely necessary. With all the change going on, you have to remember, you can't change a company without changing its management. They don't have to pack up their desks and be replaced, but every one of them needs to change to be more in tune with the mandates of the new environment. They may need to go back to school. They may need a new assignment. They may need to spend some years in a foreign post. They need to adapt. If they can't or won't, however, they will need to be replaced with others who are more in tune with the new world the company is heading to. And why is this so important? It's because bottom-up actions come from the ranks of middle managers, who by the nature of their jobs are exposed to the first whiffs of the winds of change, who are located at the periphery of the action where change is first perceived, and who therefore catch on early. Remember, snow melts at the periphery. But by the nature of their work, they can only affect things locally. The production planners can affect wafer allocation, but they can hardly affect marketing strategy. While senior managers are isolated from the winds of change, once they commit themselves to a new direction, they can affect the strategy of the entire organization. If senior management is a product of the legacy of the company, its thinking is molded by the old rules. If they're from the outside, chances are they really don't understand the evolving subtleties of the new direction. They must rely on middle management, yet the burden of guidance also cannot rest solely on the judgment of middle management. They have the detailed knowledge and the hands-on exposure, but by necessity, their experience is specialized and their outlook is local, not company-wide. An organization that has a culture that can deal with debate, chaos reigns, and a determined march, chaos reined in, is a powerful adaptive organization. Such organizations have two attributes. 1. They tolerate and even encourage debate. These debates are vigorous, devoted to exploring issues, indifferent to rank, and include individuals of varied backgrounds. 2. They are capable of making and accepting clear decisions, with the entire organization then supporting that decision. Beyond a doubt, going through the valley of death that a strategic inflection point represents is one of the most daunting tasks an organization has to endure. But when 10x forces are upon us, the choice is taking on these changes or accepting an inevitable decline, which is no choice at all. These were the lines and notes I thought were most important from Only the Paranoid Survive by Andy Grove. I enjoyed how Andy presented his ideas on strategic inflection points, and I want to one day expand on his writing when it comes to personal strategic inflection points. This concept is not only applicable to heads of conglomerates, but can also be applied to us as individuals. Just like in business, the decisions we make transform our lives, and to become better, we should analyze how the decisions of the past have shaped our outcomes, whether good or bad. If you've made it all the way to the end, thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.